Othari, Sun's Glory is the most popular deck I've ever made. It's also the most viewed YouTube video I've ever posted. And today, we're going to be going over the background of the deck, how it holds up to today, and how I would rebuild it if given the chance. We're bringing back a format that was quite popular when I did it the couple times I did. We're going to be live deck brewing today, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, and fair warning, the audio and the video are a little bit desynced. OBS seemed to have glitched for some reason, but it should be fine going forward in future videos. If you guys want to see more of this kind of content, please like, comment, and subscribe, and that will help me know that you enjoy content like this. And without further ado, let's get into it. Othari was one of my first commanders that I ever built, and I really enjoy the play patterns of it. While I'm not really a Boros person nowadays, I still really enjoy this deck in particular, and it still does pretty well. Now, when I first made this video, I claimed that I had a 90% win rate with Othari, and a lot of comments didn't really agree with that assessment. But I promise you, when I first started playing the deck, it really just never lost. I also can promise you that back when I first built the deck, we played at a much lower power level than the pod that I play at does now. Typically, back then, we would play with, precons and bracket 2 decks. So this was considered a very upgraded precon, and when you're going up against, some other slightly upgraded precons to maybe like a homebrew of a deck, it's going to do pretty well. And I realized that pretty quickly, because then I started bringing it to upper bracket decks, and the 90% win rate kind of went to the wayside. It didn't really exist anymore. Now, looking into this deck, it's not that terrible. I disagree with some of the card choices, because I think some of these cards just aren't very good. Like, I considered Faithless Looting card draw, and I considered the Big Score and Unexpected Windfall like really good cards. And they're not terrible cards, but for 4 mana, I think we can do a lot better than these 2 cards. Cut a Deal is okay, especially when we're in red and white. There's not a ton of card draw. Cut a Deal, 3 mana for 3 cards is decent, but you're giving all your opponents a card too. Thrill of Possibility isn't that bad. Thrilling Discovery also is not that bad. I think the best 2 cards here that we're definitely going to try to keep if we do is Heartwarming Redemption and Valakut Awakening. When you're in a Boros strategy and you're trying to just be as aggressive as possible, you don't care about incremental card draw all that much. We want to be explosive. So cheap, explosive card draw that allows us to just get rid of the hand that we have and draw a completely new one is going to be the best. What I've come to the conclusion of is just getting better and better cards by simply discarding everything. In terms of the extra combats, I think most of these are pretty good. I think Resurgence is probably the worst one here. Aggravated Assault is pretty decent, but we don't have any ways to like really break it. So if you're just going to play it once, it's an 8 mana thing, and I'm not a huge fan of that. And also, when it comes to extra combats, that's something we want to do, but realistically, we want to just double or triple the damage output. And extra combats is a way to do that because of the attack triggers, but there's other ways that we can add into the doubling side or the tripling side besides just extra combats that we're going to get into later. Now, here's one thing that I think I got 100% correct is the protection. Realistically, the entire engine is Othar. So I think having plenty of protection is going to be great. And especially when we're looking at playing it at, bracket 3+, protection is a good thing. I don't really agree with having a ton of interaction and removal for your opponent's things. I think that just protecting our win con is always going to be better than trying to disable somebody else's, because we know that if we're doing our thing, we're doing really well and we're probably winning the game. So protecting ourselves is always going to be better. Now, Eerie Interlude and Ghostway, I think should never have been in this list. It gets rid of all of our tokens and we don't get those back. So that's, again, something that we might want to consider when rebuilding this list. All just mental notes we're making right now. In terms of the ramp, I think this is serviceable. I don't think it's great, but I think it's serviceable. Having a card like Weather Wayfarer when I was first starting out was certainly a choice. It's not bad, but I was not utilizing it to its fullest effect, and that's what made the card kind of lackluster. You're paying 1 mana to go get any land. Wow, that's really bad. I most times would just get a basic plains or a basic mountain with this effect. And now that I've grown as a player, and now that you have grown as a player probably, we can realize why Weather Wayfarer is actually really, really good. Knight of the White Orchid is okay, but unless we're super, super white heavy, there's no real reason to do this. There's just better cards in this kind of category of ramp that we can add. We can add more mana efficient stuff, and we can also add more temporary mana. Again, we're trying to be explosive in a Boros aggro deck. We need to add more rituals, and that's something we'll focus on in the rebuild. Here's again, something that I kind of disagree with is removal. I don't think it's necessarily bad, and I think Kybera Takedown and Swords to Plowshare, maybe a Vandal Blast, Chaos Warp, and Generous Gift is all we really need. We don't need most of these, and even those 5 cards are probably a bit too much for a removal package because again, we're going so hard and so fast. Like the only thing that's really going to stop us is if every single player has a really big flyer, and in most cases they're not going to, so you're almost always going to have an open lane to go with Othari, and all the tokens just go at somebody else. The person that has somebody like that's way too big for you to go out with Othari, you just send all the tokens their way. And then when you have damage doublers and triplers and token doublers and triplers, you're in a much better spot. Next category was the token payoffs, and they're not terrible. I think just most of these are inefficient. I think Perforos, as great as he is, might actually be overcosted. I think the same with Nayali, and I think the same with Witty Roastmaster. In terms of the value, these are okay. I think Jessica's Will is the best card here. Obviously, Dockside is the best card, but he's banned. So we're not going to do anything with Dockside. I think Giselle is okay, but for 7 mana, I think we can do way better than just a damage doubler. 7 mana can get us a tripler, and even 6 mana can give us a tripler, so we don't really care too much about this. It does prevent damage to us by a little bit, but not nearly as much as we might want. Getting into the land base, again, there's a lot to be desired, which we'll get into. So now that we've gone into the background of the deck, we've talked about how it holds up, how I think about the cards that were in there in the first place, and how we might actually go about changing it. Let's get straight into the deck brewing process. So we're getting into the brewing process now, and I think the first thing we really want to focus on is the vegetables. What do I mean by vegetables? I really mean just like, what are the groundwork that's going to be put down to make sure that our Othari deck is going to be as consistent as possible from all the outside factors of the game, right? You want to be able to cast your spells, so mana is very important. You want to be able to cast your spells at the right time, so ramp is also very important. And of course, you want to be able to consistently churn through your deck, so card draw is going to be really important as well. As for the main strategy for Othari, the main strategy really is that protection aspect, as well as damage doubling. So we're going to have a pretty even split amongst the 30 to 35 cards you typically want for your main strategy to be split between those 2 cards. We want a healthy dose of protection spells, and we want a healthy dose of damage amplifiers, whether that be token doubling, damage doubling, tripling, quadrupling, exponentially, whatever, right? We want to have plenty of that. So we're going to start with the land base. Now, this is going to be a heavily upgraded land base, and that's just so that we can be as consistent as possible. We're trying to hit that bracket 3 to maybe bracket 4 even kind of power level with a strategy like this. Typically, an aggro deck is not going to be able to compete at bracket 4s and usually not at bracket 5s, usually because of all the combos that exist. But this deck will actually have a combo in it, and we'll get to that when we get to it so that we can actually, exist at bracket 4 pods. So now that we have all that out of the way, let's get into the mana. So our first bit of our mana base is going to be our lands. Now, I have 34 lands set aside. The reason for that slightly lower land count is mostly because we're going to be generating a lot of mana through cards like 3 Tree City. We're also going to have a lot of temporary mana. And of course, when it comes down to actually doing our game plan, we don't need a ton of lands. When we get into the draws, you'll see that we actually have plenty of draw spells that are going to make sure that we consistently hit our land drops anyways. Our curve is low enough where I think 34 could be good, and we are going to be adding MDFCs into this list where 34 is actually a pretty decent number. As for the land base, it's heavily upgraded. So we have plenty of dual lands, pretty much every dual land that you can run. We also have a lot of fetch lands that are going to get these dual land types. We have some dual type lands that we can fetch up, like Elegant Parlor, Glittering Massive, Sacred Foundry. We don't have the true dual land because I don't really think there's a reason to have that much in it. We don't really care about that much power, and having 3 fetches is going to be plenty. Now, the main land that we're actually going to be looking for with a card like Weathered Wayfarer that we mentioned before is going to be that 3-tree city. We could do more devotion lands, but realistically, some of the only permanents you're going to have on the battlefield are going to be tokens, and it's going to be Othari. So devotion is not really going to be something good, especially because we're in a 2-color deck. But this is a creature type heavy deck. You're going to be making a lot of rebel tokens. So the thing you're going to be choosing with 3-tree city is rebels. There are other kindred payoffs that we're going to have in here, and we'll get to that when we get to it. As for this is our land base, and we're going to move on to our mana acceleration next. For our acceleration, we have some pretty powerful spells in here. Now, in a color combo like Boros, you don't have a lot of access to straight up land ramp besides the Deep Gnome Terramancer and a couple of other catch-up ramp cards. Knight of the White Orchid in that original brew was okay for the time being because in most cases we would miss a land drop or 2 maybe, and that helps us get right back on track. You can also play Knight of the White Orchid at the beginning of your turn in order to double landfall trigger if you ever need something like that. As for the rest of our land base, we want to focus a lot on the 3 mana rocks. In the first 2 turns, we want to be putting down support pieces that are going to help accelerate our game plan once Othari actually comes out. But by turn 3, if we put down a mana rock and then turn 4, we put down another land, we will have 5 mana. We can go land, land, land with mana rock, and then land will be 5 mana total. So these 3 mana rocks that give us additional benefits actually become pretty decent when we're trying to cast our 5-drop commander. That's exactly why we have cards like Aetheric Amplifier, Patchwork Banner, Staff of Completion, and Heraldic Banner. Now, for Patchwork Banner, you're naming Rebel again. Heraldic Banner, you're naming Red, because these are going to make your tokens that much better. If you ever get to the point where you for some reason have Heraldic Banner and Patchwork Banner out, your rebels now get +2/+1 and come out as 4/3s, which are incredible when you get to the point where you have 5 or 6 experience and you're either doubling the amount of tokens you're creating or you're doing an extra combat. It's going to be insane. As for the rest of our mana acceleration, Aetheric Amplifier is not only a mana rock from Aether Drift, you can also make sure that you can double your experience counter. It's supposed to be for, I believe, energy, but instead it's gonna be for experience counters, which is great. As for our quick mana accelerations and our rituals, we've got cards like Soul Ring, Battle Hymn, Seething Song, Mana Vault, and Jessica's Will. These are all going to make sure that we can really accelerate our game plan. Jessica's Will is able to make sure that we can cast an extra combat spell, or make sure that we can cast our commander super early into the game, as well as maybe have a follow-up spell from it. If we have a Jessica's Will and a white source, that is 8 mana total. We're able to then cast Othari's Sun's Glory and cast a Seize the Day. If it has flashback, if we're ever doing that for some reason, or if we've got 1 extra mana, we can cast the original version right then and there. It's pretty dang good. Of course, we don't want to be super slow, and sometimes we just don't get those support pieces. So a Felwar Stone, Deep Gnome Terramancer, and Arcane Signet are going to be great to round out our curve. The same goes for Weathered Wayfarer. If you ever have a hand with Weathered Wayfarer, you probably want to keep it unless you have like no other acceleration at all, or you have no other support pieces. But Weathered Wayfarer ensures that you get that 3-tree city, which is just going to get you so much mana by the end of the game. It's really worth it. Now that we have our land base as well as our mana acceleration, we're in a pretty good spot. Already, this is 47 mana sources, and we're also going to make sure that we have 2 or 3 MDFCs by the time we're done with this list. Speaking of which, we're still on our vegetables, so let's get into the card draw section where we can ensure that we hit those land drops, as well as draw into more gas. A lot of our card advantage and card draw is upgraded in the form of tokens entering the battlefield, making a bit of mana with cards like Glimpse the Impossible, or having a MDFC in Valakut Awakening, or of course just straight up wheeling our hand. We have 4, 5-ish wheel effects in this deck now that are going to make sure that we're able to consistently have gas refilling our hand. Wheel of Misfortune is great to just straight up wheel the entire table. Valakut Awakening is great to make sure you can just draw an extra hand, but you can also get rid of whatever cards you want so you can keep your gas while drawing into more. Brass's Tunnel Grinder is the same thing. Heartwarming Redemption is the same thing. And then Reforge the Soul, sometimes you can cast it for its miracle cost, but in most cases it's going to be a 5 mana wheel. Is that really efficient? Not really, but it's another wheel that we can add to this deck, which I think is perfectly fine. As for the incremental draw, I know we said in the beginning that it's not the best to have, but having a Takaja's Welcome, Chivalric Alliance, Enduring Innocence, and Caretaker's Talent in the deck is not that bad. And here also we find our first inclusion of that MDFC in the Valakut Awakening, making sure that our land count is now 35. This is a pretty decent draw package for what we can really get from a Boros color combination. You can obviously add some other things that allow you to still dig. I don't think Big Score and Unexpected Windfall are actually that terrible, as they do make you mana, which can be considered like some temporary ramp for Othari, but I just personally don't think they're that good, especially I don't value it as highly as I used to. So that's the vegetable part of our deck. If I were to make any differences here, there's a couple considerations that you might want to have, so let's get into that first. Now, if you really want to up the power level, I think a Smothering Tithe is a great include in a list like this. Because you're going to be wheeling a lot of your opponents, it's really easy to just continuously draw into more and more gas. Have something like Smothering Tithe with the Enlightened Tutor and the Gambling so that you can actually get pretty consistent and decent mana acceleration if nobody has an answer for it. Besides that, if I were to replace any of these cards with Smothering Tithe, it'd probably be Enduring Innocence, simply because at some point we are going to be making sure that our tokens get bigger as they enter, so sometimes Enduring Innocence simply won't trigger, which can definitely be an issue. So that's probably the first card I would look at replacing. For now though, let's put the Smothering Tithe into the sideboard and we'll revisit it whenever we get to the end. Now you can obviously this deck is already pretty pricey at $446, but when you're competing at a bracket 4 level and you're trying to have all of these fetch lands and you're trying to have some of these game changers in here and tutors and all these things, sometimes it can get a little bit pricey, but I think that's fine, especially since we're going to be playing at a higher bracket level. And now that we have the vegetables ready to go, we've got a pretty consistent deck for Boros that's going to let us continuously churn through our deck, have plenty of mana that's geared towards our commander, and have a pretty dang good land base. Let's get into the main strategy of the deck, which is going to be protecting our commander. Here is our protection suite. We've got 17 cards that are going to allow us to protect our commander in some form or fashion. We also have some cards that allow us to protect our board state, but we really care about that single target protection. These are the cards you really want to hold on to, and these are the cards you want to make sure that you can cast the turn you play Othari. You don't really want to play Othari when you have only 5 mana, unless of course you have like a Mother of Runes out, a Skrelv out, or a Giver of Runes out, or let's say you have a Swiftfoot Boots out. That's where it makes sense to actually play Othari when you have 5 mana, or in Swiftfoot's cases 6 mana, but for the most part you want to make sure that you can cast one of these spells and you have one of these spells before you cast Othari. If you're at higher bracket gameplay, most of the time they're going to have at least 1 or 2 removal spells for your commander, and you want to try to avoid those as best as possible. Now, you might ask why we don't include a Lightning Greaves in this list. The biggest reason is because it gives our commander Shroud, which means it can't be targeted by anybody. And the biggest problem with that is the fact that we have some of these spells that give protection, which means it just can't be destroyed by that color. There's some times where we need to be able to make sure that we have it given it indestructible. There's sometimes we might want to phase it out. We want to be able to target our commander because that makes it easier for us to protect our commander. We wouldn't want to have to give something Shroud and then not be able to protect it from a non-targeting board wipe, if that makes sense to you. As for the rest of it, we have plenty of different ways and different angles that we can go about it. Obviously, we have the free interaction that's going to protect our board state, or deflect something away from us. Same with redirect lightning. We also have just straight up protection giving. We've got phasing out. We have cards that can return it to their hand. We've got a ton of different angles and ways that we can protect our commander, which is going to be great for us. And now that we have protection out of the way, let's finally get into the meaty stuff. The extra combats, the token doublers, everything that's going to amplify our damage as much as possible. This is our damage amplification suite. This is going to make sure that we put out a ton of damage onto our opponents, and we make sure that we can actually be the aggro deck at the table. You already kind of know what's about to go down here, so let's just get right into it. We have extra combats like Full Throttle, Seize the Day, World at War, and Resurgence. The reason I like Response and Resurgence, even though it's a bit of a weaker extra combat spell, is because it also allows us to have Response, which is able to make sure that we can defend our creature and is a more aggressive piece of removal. If there ever is a 5 health flying creature that can block Othari, but you need to get damage in on that player, you can just kill it. And that's always going to be helpful for someone like us. As for our last extra combat spell, so to say, Breath of Fury. Now, I mentioned earlier that there is an infinite combo in this list, and this is a part of that, but we'll get to that later because of it. This is editor deck driver here. We did not get back to it. The actual combo for Breath of Fury will be one of your haste enablers like Enduring Courage or Roar of Resistance with Breath of Fury and of course Othari out. You're going to attach Breath of Fury onto any of your tokens and make sure that you have somebody that cannot block your creature. From there, you will then swing, hit somebody with Breath of Fury, and make more tokens. You will repeat this process. Every single time you'll deal combat damage, you'll kill that token, you'll attach it to another token. Any tokens that you have will have haste, so it doesn't really matter if you have one of these haste enablers. You will be able to do this as many times as possible until you kill the whole table. The next part is, of course, our damage amplification. Having something like Inspiring Leader, Valor in Akros, Gold Knight Commander, Cathar's Crusade, these are all going to make sure our tokens are absolutely massive on board. Enduring Courage and Roar of Resistance are going to do the same thing. Enduring Courage, every time something enters, it's going to gain haste, and it's going to give it +2/+0, which is effectively doubling our damage. Roar of Resistance does the same thing. Now, there is one card in here, Shared Animosity. A lot of people think that it's pretty bad because you don't get the attack trigger. Some people think it's great and they realize you don't get the attack trigger when those tokens initially come out, but that doesn't really matter. Unless our creatures are immediately dying every turn cycle, this is going to get to the point where the creatures that are attacking with it that do get the attack trigger are going to get insanely huge. It's going to get really, really big because although the creatures entering don't get the benefit, the creatures that already exist do benefit from the new creatures that are entering, which is why it's so good. If you already have 6 out on the battlefield, they'll all get +6/+0, but they'll also get another plus whatever for the amount of creatures that are entering. So they'll all get plus an extra 7 if 7 more enter the battlefield because you can stack the triggers the right way. Valor and Akros, Cathar's Crusade are all kind of the same thing. Whenever these creatures enter, they're giving your entire board an insanely huge buff. If you have 7 creatures enter at the same time, they're all going to get +7/+7, which these are why they're your most valuable engines by far. Whenever it comes to Enlightened Tutor, you're either going to tutor up a Cathar's Crusade, a Breath of Fury, or a Smothering Tithe if you end up including that. If you don't, you probably get an Anointed Procession. These cards are going to make your board stay absolutely lethal. Now, on the topic of essentially doubling, most of these cards do that. There are a couple that triple, like Ohertak, City on Fire, and Full Throttle. These are all going to essentially triple your damage. Some are going to go basically exponential. I think it's actually factorial. I'm not really sure what the mathematical term is, but most of these are just going to double thing. Anointed Procession doubles your tokens. Inspiring Leader doubles the power of the 2/2, so it's kind of like a doubler, and it's only 3 mana. Windcrag Siege is going to double all your attack triggers, making sure that you get that much more experience counters that much quicker. And Roaming Throne is like a better Windcrag Siege. This time you're naming Phoenix, which this one gets kind of confusing because for other kindred types that we have in this deck, we name Rebel, but for this we name Phoenix because this is the only trigger we're really trying to double. But it ends up making a lot of sense because of it. And that is our damage amplification. So for our main strategy, we have damage amplification and protection. We want a pretty decent split between the two, and we really want more damage amplification if we're being honest, because we do have a self-recurring ability in Othari. So damage amplification is going to be great for us, and protection we still have plenty of. We've got 17, leading to 35 cards for our main strategy. Then for our vegetables, we've got 61 total cards. We have 34 lands with 2 MDFCs. We've got plenty of mana acceleration, both temporary, really good rocks that synergize with our commander really well. We've got some ways to tutor out perfect lands. We've got great mana acceleration. We then have plenty of card draw. The only thing this deck is now missing is some of that removal, so let's get into it. For our removal, it's pretty lean. We have a catch-all, destroy target permanent with generous gift. We've got Swords to Plowshare that can really efficiently get rid of any creature. And we have 2 pseudo combat tricks that are also doubling as lands. These are all great cards. They're able to be played at instant speed, and they're able to get rid of things that are in your way or are directly affecting you. Besides that though, we're really just trying to protect our board state as best as possible, which is why we include more protection than actual removal, giving us around, 21 interaction spells total, and maybe even a bit more depending on how much you consider these pumping. This deck has improved drastically from my first video on it, and I really am excited to see what you guys think about these changes. If you think it's a little bit better, maybe you think it's a little bit worse, maybe you think it doesn't belong in bracket 4, whatever you think, let me know in the comments below. And if you guys like content like this, where I go through a deck live, we brew it live, we talk about it live, please let me know, and I'd love to have more content like this on the channel. I've had a few videos in the past where we do live deck brews like this, and so far it's gotten pretty decent coverage, but just want you guys to know if you want to see even more of this. And that's exactly how I would rebrew Othari's Sun's Glory. It's a deck that I still really hold dear to my heart to this day. It's probably not my favorite deck anymore. I think Braids definitely takes the cake for that. But Othari is still a really great option when I'm trying to play some aggressive EDH. If you guys enjoyed this video, please feel free to like and subscribe, and comment down below any decks that you might want to see in the future for more live deck brews. YouTube thinks that the video on the screen here is something that you will like, so you might as well go click on it, and I'll see you there. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all next time.